times. It was just after midnight when the call came in. Dispatch reported a disturbance at an old residence on the edge of town, nothing too unusual for this time of night, except for one detail. The caller hadn't spoken a single word, not a cry for help, not a whisper. Just heavy breathing, and then in the background, the unmistakable sound of a clock chiming. Once, twice, 3 times, all the way to 13. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Officer Daniel Reeves had been on the force for nearly 2 decades. He'd seen his share of false alarms, domestic squabbles, and late-night pranks. But something about that recording made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. 13 chimes. No clock he'd ever encountered struck 13. Not in real life. Not unless something was very, very wrong. The house sat at the end of a long, overgrown driveway, shrouded by oaks that hadn't been trimmed in years. Its windows were dark, the paint peeling like dead skin. A rusted mailbox leaned sideways, its letters long faded. No car in the driveway, no lights on inside. Just silence, thick, suffocating silence. Reeves stepped out of his cruiser, hand resting lightly on his belt. The air was colder than it should have been for this time of year. He approached the front porch, boots crunching on brittle leaves. The wooden steps groaned under his weight, each creak echoing like a warning. He knocked. No answer. He tried the doorknob. Unlocked. Inside, the smell hit him, first damp wood, old paper, and something faintly metallic. Like copper. Like blood that had dried days ago. The living room was frozen in time. A threadbare armchair facing a cold fireplace, a coffee table stacked with yellowed newspapers, a rotary phone off the hook, its cord dangling like a severed vein. And then he saw it. In the far corner of the room, standing against the wall like a forgotten heirloom, was an antique grandfather clock, tall, ornate. Its wood darkened with age, its face cracked but still legible. The hands were frozen at 12:59. Reeves frowned. If the clock had just chimed 13 times, why weren't the hands moving? He stepped closer. The floorboards didn't creak this time. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath. Then, without warning, the clock began to tick. Not the soft, rhythmic tick of a functioning timepiece. This was erratic, stuttering, like a heartbeat trying to restart after flatlining. Tick, 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 pause, tick. Reeves reached for his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I'm inside the residence. No sign of the caller, but... The clock struck. 1. He froze. 2. His hand tightened on the radio. 3. The sound wasn't coming from the clock alone. It echoed from the walls, from the ceiling, from somewhere deep beneath the floor. 4. He backed away slowly, eyes locked on the clock face. 5. The minute hand twitched, then jerked forward past 12. To 1. 6. The room temperature dropped, his breath fogged in front of him. 7. A whisper brushed past his ear. Not words, just breath. Cold, wet. 8. He spun around. Nothing there. Just shadows stretching longer than they should. 9. The front door slammed shut behind him. 10. He ran to it, tried the knob. Locked. From the outside. 11. The ticking stopped. 12. Silence. 13. The clock face cracked down the middle. Glass shards fell to the floor like ice. And from inside the hollow cavity where gears and weights should have been, something moved. Not mechanical. Fleshy. Wet. Reeves didn't wait to see what it was. He kicked open the back door, stumbled into the yard, and didn't stop running until he was back in his cruiser, engine roaring, lights flashing. He never went back. The house was condemned a week later after neighbors reported strange noises always at night, always ending with 13 chimes. The city sent a crew to demolish it, but when they arrived, the house was empty. Not just abandoned, empty. No furniture, no walls, no floorboards, just a concrete foundation. And in the center of it all, the grandfather clock still ticking. They tried to remove it. Chains snapped, crowbars bent. The crane's engine died the moment the hook touched its frame. So they left it there. And every night, just after midnight, if you drive past that lot, if you roll your windows down and listen very, very carefully, you'll hear it. Tick, tick, tick. And then, clear as a bell. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 13. No one knows who built that clock, or why it counts beyond 12. But those who've heard it say the same thing. After the 13th chime, you don't feel like yourself anymore. Your thoughts get borrowed. Your reflection lingers a second too long. And sometimes, in the dead of night, you wake up standing in front of that empty lot, staring at the clock, waiting for it to call your name. Dispatch logs still list the original call as unverified disturbance. But Reeves? He retired early, moved 3 states away, changed his number, still checks his locks twice before bed. Because last Tuesday, just after midnight, his own wall clock, brand new digital battery powered, chimed once. Then twice. He unplugged it. It chimed a 3rd time. He hasn't slept through the night since. And if you're listening to this right now, ask yourself, what time is it where you are? Because if it's just past 12, you might want to cover your ears. Stay safe out there. His name wasn't on list. It started with a clipboard. Not a dramatic object, not something you'd expect to send chills down your spine, just a standard issue, weathered clipboard with a frayed metal clip and pages of neatly printed names. Standard procedure for any official evacuation. Standard until it wasn't. The setting was a small coastal town, quiet, the kind of place where everyone knows your coffee order and your dog's name. The streets were lined with salt-bleached shingles and porch swings that creaked in the breeze. Tourists came in summer for the lighthouse and the fresh crab rolls, but locals stayed year-round, bound by generations of tides and tradition. But that night, the ocean wasn't calm. A storm was rolling in, not the usual summer squall, but something deeper, angrier. The kind that makes birds fall silent hours before it hits, that sends dogs whining into closets and old fishermen muttering prayers under their breath. The barometric pressure dropped so fast, some people reported nosebleeds. Authorities issued a mandatory evacuation for the low-lying neighborhoods. Not a suggestion, not a warning, a direct order. Buses lined the main street, engines idling in the thickening humidity. Volunteers in bright vests guided families to safety, checking names off printed manifests. Everything seemed under control, organized, efficient, almost routine, except for one man. He stood near the back of the line, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, eyes scanning the crowd like he was searching for someone who never showed up. He wasn't panicking. Not exactly. But there was a tension in his posture, a stillness that didn't belong among the chaos of crying children, barking dogs, and the occasional sob from someone clutching a framed photo. He wore a faded windbreaker, jeans, and boots caked with sand. Nothing unusual. Yet, people kept glancing at him, then looking away quickly, as if their eyes refused to settle on him for too long. When it was his turn, he stepped forward and gave his name to the volunteer holding the clipboard. The volunteer, a college student named Marcus, working community service hours after a minor traffic violation, frowned. He ran his finger down the list, then back up, then again, slower this time, squinting under the flickering emergency floodlight. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, voice low enough that only the two of them could hear. "But your name? It's not here." The man blinked. Once. Twice. "That can't be right. I live on Seaview Lane, number 42. Marcus checked again, flipping to the next page, then the previous one. All residents from Seaview Lane are accounted for. Evacuated an hour ago. Your name, it's just not on the list. A cold silence settled between them, even as the wind picked up around them, whipping papers and plastic bags into the air like startled ghosts. "I've lived there for 12 years, the man said, voice steady but tight, like a rope pulled to its limit. "I pay taxes. I get mail. I'm on the census. I'm times here asterisk." Marcus hesitated. He looked to his supervisor, a retired firefighter named Ellis, who'd been overseeing the operation from a folding chair under a pop-up tent. Ellis had a face carved by decades of smoke and salt, his left eyebrow permanently raised from an old burn scar. He He approached slowly, boots crunching on gravel, and took the clipboard without a word. He scanned the list. His expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened around the metal edge. "He's right," Ellis said finally, voice gravelly but calm. "You're not listed." The man's face went pale, not the pale of fear, but the grayish pallor of someone realizing the ground beneath them has vanished. "Then, who's been living in my house?" No one answered. Because the truth was, according to every official record, the utility company, the post office, the county assessor, even the local grocery store's delivery logs, number 42 Seaview Lane, had been vacant for over a decade. The previous owner, an elderly widow named Eleanor Voss, had passed away quietly in her sleep during a winter storm. No relatives claimed the property, the house sat empty, the power was shut off, the water disconnected, mail returned to sender with addressee deceased stamped in red, and yet, this man had keys. He showed them. A keychain with a worn-down fob from a hardware store that closed 5 years ago, a spare house key with grooves smoothed by years of use, even a garage remote that still blinked green when he pressed the button. He pulled out his driver's license address matched. His phone showed recent photos, the living room with his dog on the rug, sunlight streaming through lace curtains, the kitchen with coffee mugs drying on the counter, a half-eaten apple beside the sink, the backyard where he'd planted tomatoes just last spring, their vines already heavy with green fruit. None of it should have existed. Authorities let him board the bus, not because they believed him, but because turning someone away during a mandatory evacuation wasn't protocol, and frankly, no one wanted to argue with a man who looked like he hadn't slept in days and carried the weight of something no one else could see. He sat alone in the back, staring out the window as the town disappeared behind sheets of rain. The storm broke just as they crossed the bridge, out of town, lightning splitting the sky like a seam, thunder so deep it vibrated in your ribs. He didn't flinch, just kept watching the rearview mirror as if expecting something to follow. The next morning, after the storm passed and the floodwaters began to recede, a team went to inspect Seaview Lane. Every house was intact, flooded in some cases, shingles torn off, porches washed away, but standing, except number 42. It was gone. Not destroyed, not collapsed. Asterisk. Gone asterisk, as if it had never been built. The lot was empty, overgrown grass, a single mailbox post leaning in the mud, but no foundation. No rubble? No sign a structure had ever occupied that space? Even the old oak tree that used to shade the front yard vanished. Roots, trunk, everything. They checked satellite imagery from the past 5 years. Nothing. No house, no driveway, no roofline, not even a shadow where one should have been. But the man's photos? Still on his phone. Clear, detailed, real. Timestamps verified by the device's internal clock. Geotags placed him squarely at coordinates that, according to every map, were just empty land. He was questioned for hours, polygraphed, his background checked by state and federal databases. No criminal record, no history of mental illness, no aliases. He worked as a marine biologist at the local university, specializing in deep-sea sediment analysis. Quiet, reliable, never missed a day of work. Colleagues vouched for him, described him as the kind of guy who brings soup when you're sick and never mentions it again. His dog, a golden retriever named Finn, was found wandering near the evacuation center, collar still on, leash trailing behind, muddy but unharmed. Finn's microchip registered to the same address. Now, here's where it gets stranger. A week later, a maintenance worker at the county records office was sorting through archived property files, paper backups, the kind no one looks at anymore, when he found something odd. Tucked into a folder labeled Seaview Lane Vacant Properties was a single sheet of paper, a handwritten addendum, dated just 3 days before the storm. It listed a new resident for number 42, name, the man from the bus. Occupation, marine biologist. Emergency contact, none. Signature at the bottom, but not his. The handwriting was identical to Eleanor Voss's, the one who died over 10 years ago. Same looping cursive, same slight tremor in the T-cross. The paper smelled faintly of salt water and lavender, her favorite scent, according to neighbors who remembered her tending roses in a wide-brimmed hat. The clerk showed it to his supervisor. The supervisor called the sheriff. The sheriff called the state archives. No one could explain how it got there. The file had been sealed since the property was declared abandoned. No one had accessed it in years. They tried to track down the man again. He'd vanished, left his hotel room without checking out, left his dog with a neighbor who'd only known him as the quiet guy from Seaview, left his job, his bank accounts untouched, his car parked at the university lot with a half-finished coffee in the cup holder. The only thing missing was the clipboard, or so they thought. Months later, a hiker in the northern woods over 200 miles away reported finding a backpack near an abandoned ranger station. Inside, a waterlogged journal, its pages swollen but legible, a rusted key that didn't match any known lock, and a single page torn from an official evacuation list. One name was circled in shaky handwriting, not his own. Beneath it, scribbled in the margin, asterisk, if your name isn't on the list, you were never supposed to leave. Asterisk. The journal contained daily entries, mostly mundane tide patterns, water temperature readings, grocery lists, but in the final weeks, the tone shifted. Entries became fragmented. Paranoia crept in. Asterisk. The neighbors don't wave back anymore. Asterisk. Asterisk. Mailbox is full, but no mail. Asterisk. Asterisk. Finn barks at the empty chair. Asterisk. The last entry, dated the morning of the evacuation, reads simply, asterisk. They're coming to take the house. I have to be on the list. Asterisk. Investigators combed through every angle. They interviewed former residents of Seaview Lane. One elderly woman, bedridden in a nursing home, whispered through tears that she'd seen lights in number 42 just last Tuesday, even though the power had been off for years. Another claimed the widow Eleanor used to say the house only lets in those it chooses. Then there was the audio. During the evacuation, a body cam from a nearby officer accidentally captured the moment the man spoke to Mark. In the background, barely audible over the wind, you can hear something else, a low hum, almost subsonic. And then, just as the man says, "I'm here," a faint voice layered beneath his own whispers, asterisk. But you weren't. Asterisk. The recording was analyzed by 3 separate audio labs. All confirmed the second voice wasn't electronic interference, it matched no known voice in any database. And it spoke in perfect sync with the man's lip movements, except the words were different. To this day, no one knows how he got on that bus. No one knows who or what was living in that house. And no one can explain why, during every major storm, emergency dispatch receives a call from a number that doesn't exist. A voice whispering just one sentence before the line goes dead. Asterisk. Check the list again. Asterisk. Some say the house wasn't erased. It just stepped out of time. That it exists in the gaps between breaths, between heartbeats, between the seconds when no one is looking. And the man? Maybe he wasn't the resident. Maybe he was the warning, a glitch in the system, a soul the house let go because it needed room for someone else. Because here's the thing they don't tell you about evacuation lists. They're not just about who's leaving. They're about who's allowed to. And if your name isn't there, maybe you were never really there to begin with. Maybe you were just borrowed. And maybe, somewhere out there, another clipboard is being prepared. Another storm is gathering. And another man is standing in line, heart pounding, hoping his name appears before the clock runs out. Stay safe out there. She woke in wrong house. It began with a headache. Not the sharp, stabbing kind, not the migraine that blinds you. This was deeper, like pressure building behind her eyes, as if her skull were slowly filling with wet sand. She'd gone to bed early, exhausted from a double shift at the hospital, and remembered little after her head hit the pillow. Just the hum of the ceiling fan, the soft weight of her cat curled against her ribs, and then nothing. Until she woke up. Cold linoleum beneath her bare feet, the smell of mildew and old wood, a dim yellowish light filtering through grimy windows she didn't recognize. She sat up slowly, heart hammering, and looked around. This wasn't her apartment. The walls were covered in faded floral wallpaper, peeling at the seams. A threadbare armchair sat in the corner, its stuffing leaking like entrails. On the coffee table, a chipped teacup, cold ash in the tray beside it, and a newspaper dated, but the ink smudged beyond reading. The air was still. Too still. No traffic outside. No distant sirens. No hum of the city she'd lived in for 7 years. She called out, "Hello?" Only silence answered. She checked her phone. Dead. No signal anyway. The charger wasn't hers, thick, old, with a 2-prong plug she hadn't seen since childhood. She tried the light switch, flickered once, then stayed on, casting long shadows that seemed to twitch at the edge of her vision. Panic rose, but she forced it down. She was a nurse, trained for emergencies, assess, adapt, survive. She moved to the front door, locked. Not with a deadbolt, just a simple turn knob lock, the kind you'd find in a house from decades ago. She twisted it, pulled, the door opened, not to a hallway, not to a street, to a forest. Thick, ancient trees pressed close, their branches knotted like arthritic fingers. Fog clung to the ground, swirling gently as if breathing. No path, no road. Just endless woods stretching into gray mist. She slammed the door shut. Back inside, she searched for clues. In the bedroom, a narrow bed with a crocheted blanket, a dresser with a cracked mirror, no photos, no personal items, just a single hairbrush on the nightstand with strands of dark hair that weren't hers. She was a redhead. In the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed weakly. Inside, a carton of milk well past its expiration, a half-eaten loaf of bread moldy at the edges, and a single jar of pickles, her favorite brand. The same one she always bought. That's when the nausea hit. Not from the smell, from the impossibility. How did her favorite pickles end up in a stranger's fridge in a house that shouldn't exist? She tried the back door, also unlocked. Same forest, same fog, same suffocating quiet. She sat on the porch steps, arms wrapped around herself, trying to think, had she sleepwalked, been drugged, kidnapped, and left here as some cruel joke? But why leave the doors unlocked? Why stock the fridge with her food? Then she noticed something. The trees, they weren't moving. No wind, no rustling leaves, not even a bird call. The forest was frozen, like a photograph or a stage set. She stood, turned back to the house, and froze. The front door was closed. She hadn't shut it. Her breath caught. She approached slowly, hand outstretched. The knob was ice cold. She turned it. Inside, everything was the same, except the teacup was gone. In its place sat a fresh one, steam rising. She didn't touch it. She backed away, heart pounding like a trapped thing. This wasn't right. None of it was right. She needed help. She needed to get out. She walked into the forest. Not because she wanted to, because staying felt worse. The fog swallowed her within minutes. Trees loomed like silent sentinels. The ground was soft, spongy, as if it had never known a footprint before hers. She walked for what felt like hours, though her watch, still on her wrist, showed only 23 minutes had passed. Then she saw it. A house. Identical to the one she'd just left. Same peeling wallpaper, same crooked porch, same yellow light in the window. She ran to it, desperate. Maybe someone was inside. Maybe this was the real world. She burst through the door. The armchair was empty. The teacup sat on the table cold again. And on the floor, near the bed, lay her hospital ID badge. The one she'd worn to work the night before. Her name, her photo, her fingerprint smudge on the corner. She picked it up, hands shaking. Then she heard it. A soft creak from the hallway. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. She ducked into the closet, holding her breath. The footsteps stopped outside the bedroom door. Silence. Then, a whisper so quiet it might have been her imagination. Asterisk. You're not supposed to be here. Asterisk. Not angry, not threatening, just sad. Resigned. She waited. Minutes stretched. No movement, no sound. When she finally stepped out, the house was empty. But the back door was open. She ran. through the forest, past the second house, past a third she hadn't seen before. Each one identical, each one lit from within, each one with a steaming teacup on the table if she dared look inside. She didn't. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out. When she woke again, she was in her own bed. Sunlight streamed through familiar blinds. Her cat purred on the pillow beside her. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, missed calls from work, a text from her sister asking if she was okay. She laughed. A shaky, relieved sound. It was a dream, a stress-induced nightmare. That was all. She got up, showered, dressed, made coffee, checked the fridge pickles in the door, just where she left them. Everything was normal until she opened the closet. On the floor, tucked behind her winter boots, was a single teacup. Chipped, cold, stained with old lipstick. Not hers. She dropped it. It shattered. And that's when she noticed the smell. Faint at first, then stronger. Mildew. Old wood. Forest damp. It was coming from her sheets. From her hair. From inside her lungs. She called in sick, spent the day cleaning, washing everything, scrubbing the floors, throwing out the cup shards. But that night, as she lay in bed, she heard it. A soft creak from the hallway. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The doorknob turned, the door opened just enough to let in a sliver of darkness, and from the hallway, the same whisper. Asterisk, you left the door unlocked. Asterisk. She never slept in that apartment again. She moved across town, changed her number, avoided forests, stopped drinking tea. For months, nothing happened. Life returned to normal. She started to believe it was over. Then, last Tuesday, she woke up. Old linoleum beneath her feet, faded floral wallpaper, and on the coffee table, a fresh teacup. Steam rising, her favorite pickles in the fridge, and outside the window, the same endless forest waiting. Only this time, she didn't run, because deep down, she knew she hadn't woken up in the wrong house. She'd woken up in the only Times house that remembered her, and it wasn't going to let her go again. Police reports list her as a missing person now. Her apartment sits empty, untouched. But neighbors say they sometimes see a light on late at night. And if you press your ear to the door, just after midnight, you can hear two voices, one tired, one calm, talking softly over tea. One asking to leave, the other always answering the same way. Asterisk, but you're already home. Asterisk, stay safe out there. The road ended in nowhere. It started with a wrong turn, not the kind you correct with a quick U-turn and a muttered curse. This was deeper, subtler. The kind that doesn't feel wrong until it's far too late to turn back. Trucker Marcus Bell had driven this stretch of highway more times than he could count. Route 87, cutting through the high desert plateau, was his regular run between the distribution hub and the regional warehouse near the state line. Flat, empty, predictable, just the way he liked it. No traffic, no distractions, just the hum of diesel, the glow of the dashboard, and the open road stretching into the horizon like a promise. But that night, something was off. He'd left the depot at dusk, as usual, checked his load, confirmed his GPS, set the cruise control. The first 2 hours passed without incident, radio playing low, coffee in the thermos, stars beginning to prick through the violet sky. Then, around mile marker 214, his GPS flickered. Just once. A brief stutter, the screen went black for half a second, then rebooted. When it came back, the route had changed. Not by much, just a slight reroute cutting through County Road K19 instead of staying on the main highway. Faster route, the voice said, calm and synthetic. Estimated time saved? 11 minutes. Marcus frowned. He knew K19. It was a gravel service road, barely maintained, used mostly by ranchers and survey crews, not rated for 18-wheelers. But the GPS insisted, and honestly, he was tired. 11 minutes sounded good. He took the turn. At first, it seemed fine. Gravel crunched under his tires, fence posts lined the road, spaced evenly, bleached white by the Sunday the moon was full, casting long silver shadows across the sagebrush. He rolled down his window, let the cool desert air rush in. Then the fence posts stopped. Not gradually, not fading into the distance. They just ended. One post, then nothing. As if someone had drawn a line in the sand and said, "This far and no further." He slowed. The road kept going, still gravel, still straight, but the landscape changed. The sagebrush thinned. The ground grew smoother, almost paved, though it was still dirt. No tire tracks, no footprints. Nothing had passed this way in a long, long time. His radio crackled static, then silence. He tried switching stations. Nothing but white noise. He checked his phone. No signal, not even the faintest bar. He kept driving. What else could he do? Turn around on a narrow road in the dark? Risk getting stuck? He'd push forward, find the next junction, loop back. But the road didn't bend, didn't curve, didn't intersect with anything. Mile after mile, the same flat expanse stretched in every direction. No hills, no lights, no stars directly overhead, just a strange, milky haze that dimmed the constellations like a veil. Then his odometer stopped. Not malfunctioned, not frozen, it simply ceased to count. The number stayed fixed at 3,842.6 miles, no matter how far he drove. He tapped the dashboard, nothing. His watch, too, had stopped. Hands frozen at 1:17 a.m. He felt a cold prickle at the base of his skull. He pulled over, stepped out into the silence. Not the peaceful quiet of the desert. This was different, thicker, heavier, like sound itself had been swallowed. He shouted just to hear his own voice. No echo. He walked to the edge of the road, shined his flashlight into the brush. The beam didn't scatter. It just ended. About 20 feet out, the light vanished, as if hitting an invisible wall. He turned back to his truck, and that's when he saw it. The road behind him was gone. Not blocked, not washed out. Gone. Where his tire tracks should have been, there was only smooth, undisturbed earth flat, featureless, stretching back into the haze like a blank page. His truck sat alone on a ribbon of gravel that led forward, but had no past. Panic clawed at his throat, but he forced it down. He was a professional. He'd handled blowouts, brake failures, even a coyote running under his wheels. This was just disorientation. A trick of the light. Fatigue. He got back in, started the engine, and drove forward. Faster now. Desperate. The road stayed straight. The haze thickened. His headlights began to dim, not from battery drain, but as if the darkness was absorbing the light. Then, up ahead, something appeared. A sign. Weathered wood, no reflectors, hanging crooked on a single post. He slowed as he approached. It read, in peeling white paint, asterisk, asterisk, end of road, asterisk, asterisk. Below it, hand scratched into the wood, someone had added, asterisk, asterisk, turn back while you still can. Asterisk, asterisk. But there was nowhere to turn. He stopped the truck, sat there for a long time, engine idling, hands gripping the wheel. Then, against every instinct, he stepped out again, walked to the sign, touched it. The wood was cold, damp, and covered in tiny scratches, not from weather, but from fingernails. Dozens of them. Hundreds. He looked past the sign. The road didn't stop. It just faded. The gravel became dust. The dust became nothing. And beyond that, pure, empty white. Not fog, not mist, just absence. A void where the world had been erased. He took one step forward. The ground felt different. Softer. Like walking on memory. He took another. His boot sank slightly, as if the earth couldn't decide if it should hold him. He stopped, looked back at his truck. It was already farther away than it should have been. He turned around, and that's when he saw the footprints. Not his. Smaller, barefoot, leading from the void onto the road, toward his truck. His blood turned to ice. He ran. Not toward the void, not toward the footprints, just ran back to the cab, slammed the door, gunned the engine. He didn't look in the mirror. He drove, and drove, and drove, until the gravel gave way to asphalt. Until the stars returned. Until his GPS rebooted, chirping cheerfully, recalculating route. He didn't stop until he reached the warehouse. He reported the incident to his dispatcher. A clipped, shaky account of a GPS glitch and a confusing detour left out the sign, the footprints, the void. They logged it as driver fatigue, recommended rest. But Marcus knew. 2 days later, during a routine maintenance check, the mechanic found something wedged in the rear axle. A child's shoe, mud-caked, worn thin at the heel, laces missing. Inside, still damp, was a folded piece of paper. On it, written in crayon, asterisk, asterisk, you left the door open, asterisk, asterisk. Marcus never drove Route 87 again. He quit trucking, moved inland, took a job stocking shelves at a grocery store, avoided maps, avoided roads that ran too straight. But last month, during a late shift, he saw something that made his blood freeze. A delivery truck pulled into the loading dock, same make, same model as his old rig. The driver stepped out. Same build, same walk. But it wasn't him. The man glanced at Marcus, gave a small, knowing nod, then walked inside. Marcus followed. The man wasn't at the register, wasn't in the break room, wasn't anywhere. But on the floor near the back exit, fresh gravel and a single bare footprint leading out into the parking lot. Marcus called the police. They found nothing. But that night, as he lay in bed, he heard it. The low rumble of a diesel engine idling outside his apartment. He looked out the window. No truck, just an empty street. And at the end of it, where the pavement met the darkness, the faintest glow of taillight. Waiting, because the road doesn't end, it just finds you again. And this time, it won't let you leave. State troopers still list County Road K-19 as unmaintained but passable. Satellite images show it terminating at a dry wash, just like any other desert track. But locals, ranchers, surveyors, night shift workers know better. They say if you drive K-19 past midnight and your headlights start to dim, don't look ahead. Look behind you, because the road that ends in nowhere, it's already behind you, and it's closing fast. Stay safe out there. Voices came from empty chair. It began with a chair, not an antique, not a cursed heirloom, just an ordinary wooden dining chair, 4 legs, straight back, slightly wobbly on the left rear leg. The kind you'd find at any thrift store, garage sale, or inherited from a relative who didn't have much to leave behind. It sat in the corner of a modest living room in a rented bungalow on the outskirts of a town, so small it didn't even have a stoplight. The house had been vacant for months before the new tenant moved in. He needed somewhere quiet, somewhere cheap, somewhere no one would ask questions. His name was Elias Reed, late 30s, quiet. Worked overnight security at a data storage facility 20 miles away. Preferred silence to small talk. Owned little, just a duffel bag of clothes, a secondhand laptop, and a coffee maker that hissed like an angry cat. He bought the chair for $8 at a flea market because his back hurt from sitting on the floor. He placed it near the window, facing the yard. Not for guests, he never had any, but because he liked watching the birds at dawn after his shift. The first time he heard it, he thought it was the wind, a soft murmur, barely audible, like someone whispering just out of earshot. He was making coffee, back turned, when it came again clearer this time. Tired. He froze, turned slowly. The room was empty, just him, the coffee maker, and the chair. He checked the windows, locked, front door secure, no one in the backyard. He even opened the closet, half expecting a squatter or a raccoon. Nothing. He chalked it up to exhaustion. 36 hours awake, too much caffeine, too little sleep, happens to everyone. But it happened again the next night. This time, he was sitting on the couch, laptop open, when the voice came low, raspy, unmistakably human. You shouldn't be here. Elias snapped his head toward the chair. Empty. He stood, walked over, touched the seat, cold, dry, no hidden speakers, no wires, nothing. He recorded the room with his phone for 3 hours, played it back. At the 1:47 mark, a voice definitely not his says, clear as day, he's watching. No one was watching. The blinds were closed. The street was empty. He tried to return the chair, drove back to the flea market. The vendor, a woman with silver braids and eyes that never blinked, shook her head. That chair's been sold, she said. You can't give it back. But I just bought it last week, Elias said. She smiled faintly. Not to you. He left it on the curb that night, tied a free sign to the backrest. The next morning, it was back on his porch, undisturbed. No footprints, no tire marks, just the chair facing the door as if it had walked home. That's when he stopped sleeping. He started noticing other things. The chair would be in a different position each morning, turned slightly toward the bed or angled toward the kitchen, as if following his movements. Once, he found it in the hallway, blocking the bathroom door. He hadn't moved it. Then came the conversations. Not just single words, full exchanges between the chair and something else. One night, lying awake, he heard it. Did you bring it? Yes. Good. He's almost ready. Elias didn't move, didn't breathe. He stared at the ceiling, heart slamming against his ribs. The next day, he called a local priest. Not because he was religious, but because he'd heard stories. The priest came, sprinkled holy water, said a prayer, left quickly without making eye contact. Later, Elias found the priest's business card torn in half on the kitchen table. On the back, in handwriting that wasn't his, too late. He considered moving. But where would he go? And what if the chair followed? Then, one evening, he decided to test it. He sat in the chair just once to see what would happen. The moment he lowered himself onto the seat, the room changed. The air grew thick, humid, like a basement after a flood. The light dimmed, though the sun was still up. And then silence. Not peaceful silence. The kind that presses against your eardrums like water. And then a voice, not from the room, but from inside his own head. You've been sitting in my spot. Elias bolted up so fast, he nearly fell. His skin was clammy, his mouth tasted like copper. He didn't sit in it again, but the chair didn't need him to. Neighbors began to notice. Mrs. Calloway from next door knocked one afternoon, pale-faced. Your lights were on all night, she said, and I heard talking, two voices, like you had company. Elias shook his head. I live alone. She stared at the window, at the chair. Then who were you talking to? He had no answer. The final incident happened on a Tuesday. Elias came home from work, exhausted, to find the front door unlocked. He always locked it. Always. He stepped inside, hand on his flashlight like a weapon. The chair was in the center of the room, facing the door, and on the seat, his security badge. The one he'd worn to work that night, the one he'd left clipped to his belt. He hadn't been home all day. He picked it up. The plastic was warm. Then the voice came, not a whisper, not a murmur, but a full sentence, spoken with calm certainty. You don't need to go back. Elias backed out of the house, didn't pack, didn't call anyone, just got in his car and drove until the gas ran low. He never returned. The landlord found the house empty a week later. No note, no forwarding address, just the chair, still in the living room, and a single coffee cup on the table, half full, cold, but not stale, as if it had been poured that morning. The landlord threw the chair away, hauled it to the dump himself, but 2 days later, it was back on the porch. He burned it, built a small fire in the backyard, doused it in lighter fluid, watched the wood blacken and curl. The flames hissed, the legs cracked. For a moment, he thought he heard a sigh, but it might have been the wind. He buried the ashes. A month passed, no incidents. He rented the house to a young couple. They moved in on a Saturday. By Sunday night, they were gone. Left everything, clothes, dishes, even their cat. The only thing missing, the dining set they'd brought with them. In its place, in the exact center of the room, sat a wooden chair. 4 legs, straight back, slightly wobbly on the left rear leg, and on the seat, a child's drawn crayon on lined paper, a house, a tree, 2 stick figures holding hands, and in the corner, a third figure sitting in a chair facing away. Beneath it, written in shaky letters, asterisk asterisk, he's still here, asterisk asterisk. Police reports list Elias Reed as a missing person. No evidence of foul play, no financial distress, no known enemies. His car was found abandoned near a state park, keys in the ignition, engine cold. His phone last pinged near the county line, but the tower data was corrupted, unreadable. But dispatch logs tell a different story. 3 nights after he vanished, at exactly 2:18 a.m., a call came in from his home number. No one spoke, just breathing. And in the background, 2 voices. One tired, one calm. Arguing over who gets to sit down, locals avoid that house now. The porch sags, the paint peels, but every full moon, if you drive past and glance through the front window, you'll see it. The chair, always facing the road, always empty. But if you stop your car, roll down your window, and listen very, very carefully, you'll hear it. A whisper. Soft, patient, inviting. Go ahead, it says. Take a seat. And if you do, you might never get up again. Because some chairs aren't meant for the living. They're waiting for someone to fill the silence. Stay safe out there. He found her diary yesterday. It started with a box. Not a suspicious package. Not a locked chest. Just a plain cardboard moving box left on the curb outside a recently vacated apartment complex in a quiet neighborhood where nothing ever happened. The kind of place where mail carriers wave, dogs bark at squirrels, and the biggest drama is whether the recycling gets picked up on Wednesday or Thursday. The man who found it, Daniel Mercer, wasn't looking for anything. He was just walking his dog, a scruffy terrier named Rook, after a long shift at the municipal water treatment plant. He liked these walks. Predictable, calm, the kind of routine that kept the noise in his head at bay. He'd moved into the complex 6 weeks earlier after his divorce. Needed a fresh start, a blank wall, a quiet room. The box sat tilted against a storm drain, damp from overnight rain, its flaps half open. Most people would have walked past, but something about it, the way it seemed out of place, the way the streetlight caught a glint of something inside, made him stop. He nudged it with his boot. Inside, a tangle of old clothes, a cracked picture frame, a hairbrush with strands of dark hair, and near the bottom, a small leather-bound journal. He almost left it. But Rook sniffed the box, then whined a low, uneasy sound the dog only made when something was wrong. Daniel picked up the journal. It was heavier than it looked. The leather was worn soft at the edges, the spine cracked from use, no name on the cover, just a faint scent of lavender and something sharper underneath like pencil lead and dried tears. He took it home. Not because he wanted to snoop, but because it felt wrong to leave it in the rain. He told himself he'd turn it in to the leasing office in the morning. That was all. But that night, unable to sleep, he opened it. The first page was dated simply asterisk, day 1, asterisk, no year, no month, just day 1. The handwriting was neat at first, almost clinical, but grew increasingly frantic as the entries went on. The early pages described ordinary things, grocery lists, weather observations, a neighbor's cat that kept stealing her socks. But then, around day 23, the tone shifted. Asterisk. He's watching me again. Not from the street, from inside the walls. I hear him breathing when the house is quiet. I check the vents. Nothing. But I know he's there. Asterisk. Daniel frowned. Probably just someone's private thoughts. Maybe the previous tenant had mental health struggles. He should stop reading. But he didn't. Asterisk. Day 31. I stopped locking the doors. It doesn't matter. He doesn't use doors. He just appears. Last night, I woke up and he was standing at the foot of my bed. Didn't say anything, just stared. When I turned on the light, he was gone. But the floorboards were wet. Asterisk. Daniel set the journal down. His palms were sweating. He glanced at his own bedroom door, slightly ajar. He got up, closed it, locked it. Ridiculous, he told himself. But the unease lingered. He kept reading. Asterisk, day 44. I found footprints in the hallway this morning. Bare feet. Too large to be mine. They started at the bathroom and ended in the middle of the living room. Like he walked out of the shower and vanished. Asterisk. Asterisk. Day 52. I stopped answering the phone. It rings. Once. Always once. Then stops. Caller ID says unknown. But when I pick up, I hear my own voice whispering things I never said. Asterisk. Asterisk. Day 60. I know what he wants. He doesn't want me dead. He wants me to see him, to acknowledge him, But if I do, I'll never be alone again. Asterisk. Daniel's hands were shaking now. He flipped to the last entry. It was written in jagged, hurried strokes, ink smeared as if written with a trembling hand or in the dark. Asterisk. He's here, right now. I can feel him behind me. I won't turn around. If I turn around, he wins. But I have to write this down so someone knows. My name is Asterisk. The sentence ended mid-word. The rest of the page was blank. Daniel closed the journal slowly. His apartment felt colder than usual. The hum of the refrigerator sounded louder. Too loud, like it was covering something up. He stood, walked to the window, peered out. The street was empty. Streetlights cast long, still shadows. Nothing moved. He went to bed. But he left the light on. The next morning, he called the leasing office, asked if they knew who'd lived in Unit 3B, the apartment directly above his. The manager checked the records. No one's lived in 3B for over a year, she said. Plumbing issues, water damage. It's been sealed off. Daniel frowned. Then who left the box on the curb? Silence on the line. I don't know, she finally said. But no one's been in or out of that unit. The door's padlocked from the outside. He hung up, went back to the journal, flipped through it again, looking for clues, addresses, phone numbers, anything. On the inside back cover, tucked into the binding, he found a folded receipt from a local pharmacy, dated just 3 days ago, for sleeping pills, and a pregnancy test. Both purchased by someone named L. Varga. He searched the name online. Nothing, no social media, no public records. But he did find something else, a missing persons report filed 6 weeks earlier, a woman named Lena Varga. Last seen leaving her job at a library downtown, described as quiet, kept to herself, recently separated from her partner. Her apartment, Unit 3B, the same unit that had been vacant for over a year. Daniel's stomach dropped. He drove to the library, asked the staff about Lena. They remembered her. She vanished overnight, said an older librarian, voice low, cleared out her desk, left her coat on the back of her chair, never came back. Did she seem troubled? Daniel asked. The woman hesitated. She kept saying someone was following her, that her apartment wasn't safe. We thought it was stress. Her partner, he wasn't a good man. Daniel returned home that evening with a knot in his chest. He placed the journal on his kitchen table, sat across from it, as if it were a person. That night, he heard it. A soft thud from the ceiling, like something heavy being set down. Then, footsteps, slow, deliberate, crossing the floor above him. Unit 3B was empty, sealed. No power, no water. But the footsteps kept coming. Back and forth, then silent. He didn't sleep. The next day, he called the police, showed them the journal, the receipt, the missing persons report. They took it seriously at first, sent an officer to inspect Unit 3B. The padlock was intact, no signs of forced entry. They cut it open. Inside, dust, mold, water-stained walls, an empty closet, no furniture, no personal items. But on the floor, near the center of the room, they found something. A single page torn from a journal. It read, asterisk, he found my diary yesterday. Asterisk. The handwriting matched Lena's, but the entry wasn't in the journal Daniel had. It was new. Impossible. The officer looked at Daniel, then at the empty room, then back at the page. We'll keep it for evidence, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Daniel knew they wouldn't find anything else. That night, he packed a bag, booked a motel on the other side of town, but as he zipped his suitcase, he heard it again. Footsteps, not from above, from inside his own apartment, coming down the hall. He froze. The doorknob to his bedroom turned. Slowly. He backed into the corner, heart pounding. The door opened. No one there. Just the journal lying on his bed. Open to a new page, one he hadn't seen before. In fresh ink, still slightly damp, it read, asterisk. Now he knows my name. Asterisk. Daniel ran, left everything behind. He didn't stop until he crossed the state line, changed his number, shaved his beard, took a job under a different name at a remote gas station, avoided cities, avoided apartments, slept with the lights on. For months, nothing happened. He started to believe it was over. Then, last week, a package arrived at his P.O. box. no return address. Inside, a new journal, identical to the first. The first page read, asterisk, day 1, asterisk, and beneath it, in handwriting that was starting to look familiar, asterisk, he's watching me again, asterisk. Police have no record of Lena Varga's body ever being found. Her case remains open, though interest has faded. The apartment complex sealed Unit 3B permanently, boarded the windows, posted condemned signs, but maintenance workers say that on quiet nights, if you stand in the courtyard and look up at the third floor window, you'll see a light flicker on. And if you listen closely, you'll hear 2 voices, one whispering, one writing. Because some stories don't end when the diary closes. They just wait for someone new to open it. And once you do, you become part of the pages. Stay safe out there. The dog wouldn't stop barking. It started with a dog, not a stray, not a neighborhood nuisance. A German Shepherd named Coda, 8 years old, retired K9 from the county sheriff's department, adopted by a quiet man named Raylan Briggs after a career-ending injury during a suspect pursuit. Raylan lived alone in a single-story ranch house at the edge of a pine forest, 20 miles from the nearest town. He liked the silence, needed it, after years as a combat medic overseas. Coda was his shadow, loyal, calm, trained to detect threats before they happened, which is why, when Coda started barking at nothing, Raylan knew something was wrong. It began on a Tuesday night, just after midnight. Raylan was reading in his armchair, lamp casting a warm pool of light, rain tapping softly on the roof. Coda lay at his feet, ears perked but relaxed, until suddenly he bolted upright, hackles raised, and let out a deep, guttural bark toward the back door. Raylan set his book down. "Easy, boy," he said. Coda didn't stop. He barked again and again. Not the alert bark he used for raccoons or delivery trucks. This was different, urgent, almost desperate, like he was trying to warn someone who wasn't listening. Raylan checked the backyard through the glass door. Nothing. Just the rain, the swaying pines, the dark. He opened the door. "Go on," he said. "Do your business." Coda didn't move. He stood rigid, eyes locked on the tree line, lips curled back in a silent snarl. Raylan stepped outside, flashlight in hand. The beam cut through the downpour, sweeping across the wet grass, the woodpile, the old shed. No movement, no eyes reflecting in the dark, no scent of another animal. He called Coda. The dog backed away from the door, still growling low in his throat, and refused to go back inside until Raylan physically guided him. That night, Coda didn't sleep. He paced the house, front window, back door, hallway, living room, stopping every few minutes to stare at a wall or a corner, ears twitching as if tracking something invisible. Raylan checked every lock, every window, even the attic hatch, all secure. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same intensity, but this time Coda barked toward the hallway closet. Not the front yard, not the woods. The closet, Raylan opened it. Coats, boots, a broken vacuum, nothing out of place. Coda lunged forward, barking so hard his whole body shook until Raylan pulled him back. By the third night, Raylan hadn't slept in 72 hours. Neighbors started complaining. One left a note on his door, asterisk, "Your dog's been howling all night. Please control him." Asterisk. But Coda wasn't howling. He was barking. At specific thing. At 12:07 a.m., the hallway mirror. At 12:19 a.m., the basement stairs. At 12:33 a.m., the empty armchair. Each time, Raylan would investigate. Each time, nothing. Then, on the fourth night, Coda did something new. He stopped barking, stood in the center of the living room, stared at the ceiling, and whined. A soft, broken sound Raylan had never heard before, not in war zones, not during thunderstorms, not even when Coda got shot. Raylan followed his gaze. The ceiling was plain white drywall, no stains, no cracks. But as he watched, a single drop of water fell. Clink. On the coffee table, he frowned. It hadn't rained in 2 days. He climbed into the attic. Dust, insulation, old boxes. And in the center of the floor, fresh footprints, bare feet, too large to be his, leading from the attic access panel to the spot directly above his bed. Raylan's blood ran cold. He called the sheriff. Deputies came, searched the property, checked the attic, swept the woods, found nothing. No signs of trespassing, no forced entry, no evidence anyone had been there. One deputy, a former K9 handler himself, knelt beside Coda. "He's not barking at animals," the man said quietly. "He's barking at something he can't chase, something that doesn't leave tracks." Raylan didn't sleep that night. He sat in the armchair with a shotgun across his lap, Coda at his side, both of them watching the dark. At exactly 12:03 a.m., Coda's head snapped toward the front door. Not barking, just staring, ears flat, tail stiff. Raylan stood slowly, walked to the door, looked through the peephole. Nothing. He opened it. The porch was empty. But on the welcome mat soaked through, though the sky was clear, was a child's mitten. Muddy. Torn at the thumb. Raylan had no children, no visitors. He picked it up with a gloved hand. Inside, Coda was trembling. Not from fear, from rage. The next morning, Raylan drove to the local historical society. Asked about the land his house was built on. The archivist, an elderly woman with thick glasses, flipped through property records, then paused. "This parcel, it wasn't developed until the late 80s, she said. Before that, it was part of the Holloway property. They lived here for generations." She lowered her voice. "Their youngest son disappeared in the winter of, well, it doesn't matter when. He was 6 years old. Vanished from his bedroom. They searched for weeks, never found him. The family moved away. The house burned down a year later, accidental fire, they said." Raylan's throat tightened. "How old would he be now?" he asked. She did the math silently. "About your age," she said. Raylan left without another word. That night, he didn't turn on the lights. Sat in the dark with Coda, waiting. At 12 a.m., the barking started again. But this time, it wasn't at the walls. It was at Raylan. Coda stood 3 feet away, eyes locked on him, barking sharp, warning barks as if Raylan were the threat. Raylan froze. "Coda, it's me," he whispered. The dog didn't stop. Then, slowly, Raylan felt it, a presence behind him. Not a sound, not a smell. Just wait. Like the air had thickened. He turned. The armchair was empty, but the cushion was indented, as if someone had just stood up. Coda barked harder. Raylan backed into the kitchen, grabbed his keys, and left. He spent the night in his truck at a 24-hour diner. Coda sat in the passenger seat, eyes on the rearview mirror the entire time. The next day, Raylan called a contractor. "I want cameras," he said. "Motion sensors, floodlights, everything." They installed them that afternoon. By nightfall, the house was wired like a fortress. Raylan sat in the living room, laptop open, feeds from every angle displayed on screen. 11:58 p.m. Coda lay at his feet, tense but quiet. 11:59 p.m. The dog's ears twitched. 12 a.m. Coda erupted into barking, furious, panicked, staring at the hallway. Raylan checked the camera feed. The hallway was empty. But then, on the thermal overlay, the system detected a heat signature. Human-shaped, standing in the hallway, not moving, just watching. Raylan's breath caught. He zoomed in. The figure had no face, no features, just a blur of warmth where a person should be. And then, as if sensing the camera, it turned toward the lens, toward Raylan. Coda lunged at the screen, barking so hard he choked. Raylan shut the laptop. He couldn't stay. He packed a bag, loaded Coda into the truck, and drove through the night. He didn't stop until he reached his sister's house 3 states away. For 2 weeks, Coda was calm. No barking, no pacing, just sleeping at the foot of the guest bed, sighing in his sleep like a dog finally at peace. Raylan started to believe it was over. Then, on the 15th night, Coda woke up, stood in the middle of the room, stared at the closet, and barked. Not once, not twice, over and over, until Raylan opened the closet door. Inside, on a shelf of folded blankets, was a small, mud-caked shoe. Child-sized, and beside it, a single pine cone from the woods behind Raylan's old house. Coda never stopped barking after that. Not for food, not for walks, not even when Raylan cried. He just stood by the window facing east, barking into the distance, as if trying to warn someone who was already gone. Raylan moved again and again. Each time, within days, Coda would find something: a toy soldier in the yard, a wet footprint on the porch, a drawing tucked under the windshield wiper showing a house with a dog and a boy holding hands. The sheriff's department ran tests. The items had no fingerprints, no DNA, no logical explanation, but Coda always knew, because dogs don't lie. They don't imagine threats. They sense what's real even when it shouldn't be. Raylan eventually stopped running. He returned to the house, not because he wanted to, but because Coda refused to leave the driveway, sat there for 3 days, barking at the front door, until Raylan finally opened it. Inside, everything was as they'd left it. Dust on the tables, mail piled up, and in the center of the living room, the armchair facing the door. Waiting, Raylan sat in it. Coda lay at his feet. And, for the first time in months, the dog was silent. Because he wasn't warning anyone, he was guarding. Neighbors say the lights are on every night now, and if you drive past after midnight, you'll see 2 figures in the window, 1 man, 1 dog, watching the tree line, waiting, because whatever came that first night, it never left. It just learned to be quiet. But Coda still hears it, and he won't stop barking until it's gone for good, or until no one is left to hear him. Stay safe out there. Footprints led back to me. It started with mud. Not the kind you track in after gardening or a rainy walk. This was thick, black, and glistening like wet tar mixed with something organic, something that shouldn't cling to concrete the way it did. It appeared on the back porch of a small, isolated cabin nestled deep in the pine barrens of northern county land. The cabin had no neighbors for miles. No streetlights, no cell service, just trees, silence, and the occasional cry of a distant owl. The man who lived there, Elias Crow, was a cartographer by trade, though he hadn't taken a job in over a year. He'd come here to map nothing, to disappear. After the accident, the one that wasn't his fault but haunted him like a debt he could never repay, he needed a place where no one knew his name, where the past couldn't find him. He kept to himself. Bought supplies once a week in town, paid in cash, spoke only when spoken to. The locals called him the quiet one. They didn't pry. That's how things worked out here. But on a cold, damp morning, just after dawn, he stepped outside to fetch firewood and saw them. Footprints leading from the tree line straight to his back door. Not deer, not coyote, human. Bare feet, each print deep, as if the person had been carrying something heavy or running. Elias frowned. He checked the locks. All secure, nothing missing, no signs of forced entry. He swept the prints away with a broom, told himself it was a lost hiker, a trespasser, someone who got turned around in the fog. But that night, he heard it. A soft crunch on the gravel path, like someone walking slowly, deliberately. He grabbed his flashlight, stepped onto the porch. Nothing, just the wind in the pines. He scanned the ground, and there they were again, fresh prints leading from the woods to his door. And then, impossibly continuing inside, he hadn't opened the door. He checked the windows. Locked. The cabin was sealed tight, yet the trail didn't stop at the threshold. It went through, as if the person had walked straight through the wood. Elias didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he followed the prints back into the woods. They were clear, deep impressions in the damp earth, spaced evenly, purposeful. He walked for nearly a mile deeper into the forest than he'd ever gone, until the trees grew so thick the sunlight barely touched the ground. And then the trail ended, not at a campsite, not at a road. It ended at a tree. An old cedar, its bark scarred with deep grooves. And carved into the wood, in jagged, hurried letters, asterisk, asterisk, you left me. Asterisk, asterisk. Elias's breath caught. He didn't recognize the writing. But the words felt like a punch to the gut. He turned to leave, and froze, because behind him, leading back the way he'd come, were new footprints. His own. But he hadn't walked back yet. He was still standing at the tree. He looked down at his boots. Dry, clean, but the prints on the ground? Wet, muddy, fresh. And they led back to the cabin. Back to him. He ran. Not because he was afraid of the woods, but because the trail wasn't just following him, it was anticipating him. That evening, he set up motion-activated trail cameras around the property, placed gravel under the windows, even sprinkled flour on the porch just to see. At 2:17 a.m., the camera triggered. The footage showed nothing at first, just swaying branches, mist curling over the ground. Then, slowly, footprints began to appear in the flour. One, then another, no body, no shadow, just bare feet materializing out of thin air, stepping toward the door. The camera captured the sound too, a wet, squelching step, then silence, then another step. Elias watched it 3 times. On the 4th viewing, he noticed something. The footprints weren't just appearing. They were erasing times themselves behind as they moved forward, like time itself was folding. He called the county sheriff. 2 deputies came out the next day, listened to his story, watched the footage, checked the tree, found nothing unusual. Stress, one said gently. Isolation does things to the mind. Elias didn't argue, but that night, he stayed awake with a shotgun across his lap. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the floorboards creaked. Not from outside. From inside the cabin, he turned on the light. On the wooden floor between the bed and the door were wet footprints, leading from the hallway to the foot of his bed, and then, as he watched, they began to fade. Not dry up. Fade. Like they were being pulled backward through time. He followed them with his eyes to the door. It was locked, but the trail didn't stop there. It continued through the wall, into the hallway, into the living room, and out the front door. He ran outside. The prints led into the woods. He followed them again. This time, they didn't end at the cedar. They ended at a shallow depression in the earth, overgrown, hidden by ferns. He brushed the leaves aside. Beneath them, a rusted metal tag. Dog tag. Name partially worn away, but the last 3 letters were clear. Asterisk, asterisk, O. Asterisk, asterisk. His last name, his own. He dropped it like it burned, because he'd never owned a dog. Never served in the military. Never worn a tag, but the accident, the one he never spoke of, involved a vehicle. A rainy night, a sharp curve, and a passenger who didn't make it. A passenger whose name started with J, whose last name was also Crow. His younger brother, they never found the body. Just the car, upside down in the ravine, driver's seat empty, passenger side caved in. Elias had walked away with a concussion, broken ribs, and a silence he'd carried ever since. He'd told investigators he blacked out, that he woke up alone, that he didn't know what happened to his brother. But now, standing in the woods, mud on his boots, tag in his hand, he remembered. He remembered opening the passenger door. He remembered pulling his brother out. He remembered carrying him barefoot, bleeding into the trees, because he was still breathing. And Elias, in his panic, in his guilt, in his desperate hope, had left him there to go get help. But he never came back. He couldn't face it, so he ran and buried the truth. But the truth didn't stay buried. The next morning, Elias packed a shovel, went back to the depression, dug. 6 inches down, he hit something soft. Not bone, clothing. A jacket, rotted but intact. And inside the pocket, a folded map. His own work. A hand-drawn trail through these very woods, with a single X marked near the cedar tree, and beside it, in his brother's handwriting, asterisk, asterisk. I waited. Asterisk, asterisk. Elias fell to his knees. That night, he didn't lock the doors. He sat on the porch, Coda, the stray dog that had shown up weeks ago, and never left lying at his feet. At 2:17 a.m., the footsteps came. But this time, Elias didn't flinch. He watched as the prints appeared on the gravel, leading from the woods to the porch to the chair beside him, the air grew cold. Coda didn't bark, just lifted his head and whined softly. Elias looked to his right. The chair was empty, but the cushion sank slightly, as if someone had just sat down. He didn't speak, didn't cry, just reached into his coat and placed the dog tag on the armrest. "Stay," he whispered. And for the first time in years, the footprints didn't lead away. They stayed right beside him. The next day, Elias reported his brother's remains to the authorities. They exhumed the site, confirmed identity through dental records, closed the case as accidental death with delayed recovery. The X plays the pass of the do that Riauer but the deputies noticed something odd. The footprints around the cabin, they never found any. Not on camera, not in soil samples, not in any official record. Yet Elias's boots were always muddy, and every morning, without fail, a fresh set of bare footprints led from the tree line to the porch and stopped at the empty chair. Neighbors say Elias still lives in the cabin. He's quieter than ever. But if you pass by at dawn, you'll see two figures on the porch. One man, one shadow, sitting in silence. Because some paths don't lead away from the past. They lead you back to it. And sometimes the footprints aren't chasing you. They're waiting for you to catch up. Stay safe out there. No one entered the room. It started with a locked door. Not a vault, not a high-security chamber, just a standard hotel room, room 314, at a modest roadside inn off Highway 9, the kind of place truckers and traveling salesmen use for a few hours of sleep between shifts. The building was old but clean, with thin walls, humming fluorescent lights, and a front desk clerk who barely looked up from his crossword puzzle. The guest who checked in that evening gave his name as Marcus Vale, paid cash, asked for a room on the third floor, away from the elevator. He carried a single duffel bag, wore a faded windbreaker, and spoke with the quiet exhaustion of someone who'd been driving for days. The clerk didn't think much of him, just another face in a long line of transient souls. Marcus took the key actual metal, not a card, and went upstairs without a word. He locked the door from the inside, not just the latch, the deadbolt too. Then he pushed a heavy wooden chair under the knob, the way people do in movies, the way he'd done every night since it began. He didn't turn on the light, just sat on the edge of the bed, back straight, eyes fixed on the door. He didn't sleep. He never did. At exactly 3 a.m., the knocking started. Not loud, not frantic. 3 soft raps, pause 3 more. Like someone polite, patient, certain they'd be let in. Marcus didn't move. He knew better. The knocking stopped after a minute. Silence returned. He exhaled. Then, on the other side of the door, he heard breathing. Slow, wet, close. Like someone had pressed their face against the peephole. Marcus clenched his fists. He stayed like that until dawn. When the sun rose, he removed the chair, unlocked the door, and stepped into the hallway. Empty. No one in sight. He went downstairs, returned the key, and left without breakfast. The clerk barely noticed. But later that day, during routine cleaning, the housekeeper found something strange. The room was immaculate, bed made, trash empty, towels unused, but on the floor, directly in front of the door, was a single set of footprints, muddy, bare feet, leading right up to the threshold, and stopping, as if whoever made them had simply vanished. She reported it to the manager. They checked the security footage from the third floor hallway. Clear as day, Marcus Vale entered room 314 at 8:47 p.m. No one else approached the door all night. No staff, no guests, no shadows. At 6:12 a.m., Marcus exited alone. But the camera showed something else. At 2:04 a.m., the door handle moved just slightly, as if someone inside had tried to open it. But Marcus never touched it, and no one came from outside. The manager reviewed the footage 3 times. Each time, the same result. No one entered the room. Yet, the footprints were real. The housekeeper swore on her life she hadn't tracked mud in. They deep cleaned the carpet. 2 nights later, another guest stayed in 314. A retired school teacher named Helen Price. She locked her door, as she always did. At 3 a.m., she heard the knocking. 3 raps. Pause. 3 more. She called the front desk. "Someone's at my door," she said, voice trembling. The clerk checked the monitor. "No one's there, ma'am." She looked through the peephole. Nothing. But when she opened the door an hour later to get ice, she found it. Footprints, same as before, muddy, bare, ending at her threshold. She left that night. Never came back. The inn's owner, a pragmatic man named Dale Mercer, didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in bad plumbing, faulty wiring, and overactive imaginations. But when 3 more guests reported the same thing, same time, same knocking, same footprints, he started to wonder. He installed a new camera inside room 314, hidden in the smoke detector wired directly to his office. Then he left the room vacant for a week. On the 8th night, he reviewed the footage himself. The room sat empty. Dust motes floated in the moonlight. The chair remained under the desk, the bed untouched. At 2:03 a.m., the knocking began. Not on the audio feed, just the visual. But the door handle turned slowly. The deadbolt slid open by itself. The chair under the knob didn't move, yet the door cracked open just an inch. Then closed. No hand, no tool, no string. Nothing. And on the carpet, as if painted by an invisible brush, footprints appeared. One, then another, walking from the door to the center of the room. They circled the bed, stopped, then walked back to the door and vanished. Dale watched it 6 times. Each time, his hands shook more. He called the local sheriff. Deputies came, swept the room, checked for hidden panels, pressure plates, even drone interference. Found nothing. The room was solid concrete and drywall, no crawl spaces, no vents large enough for a cat. No one entered the room, the lead deputy said, echoing the hotel log. But the footprints were photographed, logged, filed. Then came the call from Marcus Vale. 3 weeks later, he'd checked into a motel 50 miles away, left a message on Dale's voicemail. Voice low, strained. "I know what it wants," he said. "It's not trying to get in." He paused, breath shaky. "It's trying to get out." The line went dead. Dale tried calling back. Number disconnected. He never heard from Marcus again. But the incidents didn't stop. Guests avoided room 314. The inn eventually sealed it, padlocked the door, covered the peephole, posted a "do not use" sign. Yet every full moon, the night staff report something odd. The hallway camera glitches at exactly 2:03 a.m. For 17 seconds, the feed shows static. When it clears, the padlock on room 314 is undone. Not broken, undone, and on the hallway carpet just outside the door, fresh footprints, leading away from the room, down the hall, toward the stairs. But the front desk log shows no one checked out, no one entered the building, no one left. Because no one entered the room, but someone or something is still trying to leave. Investigators later traced Marcus Vale's past. He wasn't a salesman. He was a former orderly at a psychiatric hospital that shut down after a fire. One patient died in the blaze. A man who'd been catatonic for years locked in room 314. The only room with no windows. The only room with a chair bolted to the floor. The only room where, during the evacuation, staff swore they heard knocking. From the inside, after everyone was out, after the doors were sealed, after the fire started, they never found his body. Just a pair of bare footprints in the ash, leading from the bed to the door, and stopping, because the door was locked from the outside. Now, if you drive past that old inn, its sign faded, its windows dark, you might see a light flicker in room 314. And if you listen closely, just after 2 a.m., you'll hear it. 3 soft knocks, pause. 3 more, not asking to come in, asking to be let out, but no one's there to open the door. Because no one entered the room, and no one ever will. Stay safe out there. The photo had extra person. It started with a photograph, not an old yellowed portrait tucked in a dusty attic, not a blurry image from a ghost tour or a cheap Halloween prop. This was real. digital, taken on a crisp Saturday afternoon during a weekend hiking trip deep in the Cascade foothills, just 3 friends, a trail map, and the kind of silence that only exists when you're miles from the nearest road. No cell service, no agenda, just boots on dirt, the smell of pine resin in the air, and the kind of easy laughter that only comes when you've known someone since you were kids. Lena Chen had planned the trip. She'd needed it. Work had been relentless, endless Zoom calls, deadlines that bled into weekends, a life measured in notifications and unread emails. She wanted to disappear for a couple of days, just reset. Marcus and Eli agreed without hesitation. They'd been inseparable since middle school, the kind of friendship that didn't need words to survive. They met at the trailhead just after sunrise, thermoses full, packs strapped tight, and vanished into the trees. The hike was uneventful. A few wrong turns, a shared bag of trail mix, Marcus nearly twisting his ankle on a root, but nothing out of the ordinary. By early afternoon, they reached a rocky overlook, the kind of spot that makes you stop and just breathe. The valley stretched below them, mist curling through the trees like smoke, sunlight breaking through the canopy in golden shafts. Lena pulled out her phone. "Come on, you two smile for once," she called, balancing on a flat stone. Marcus groaned, but turned, throwing an arm around Eli's shoulders. Eli rolled his eyes, but grinned anyway. They struck their usual pose, the one they'd done since high school graduation, since road trips and late-night diner runs and hospital waiting rooms. Lena snapped the photo. One shot. Perfect lighting. No need for a second. That night, back at the rented cabin, wood stove crackling, rain tapping the roof, Lena uploaded the day's photos to her laptop while the guys played cards at the kitchen table. She scrolled through them absently, Marcus tripping, Eli mimicking a squirrel, a blurry shot of a hawk overhead. Then she reached the group photo. She froze. Her finger hovered over the track. Behind them, in the shadowed tree line, just to the left of Eli's shoulder, stood a fourth figure. Tall, thin, dressed in dark, nondescript clothing that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it, not blurred, not a trick of motion, fully in focus, as if they'd been standing there, posing. Lena's stomach dropped. She zoomed in. The figure's hands hung at their sides. Head tilted slightly, not looking at the camera, looking at times her asterisk. "Guys," she said, voice low. They looked up. She turned the screen. Marcus leaned in. "What the hell?" Eli squinted. "Is that a hiker?" "No one was on that trail," Lena said. "We didn't see a single person all day." They checked the metadata, timestamp 2:14 p.m. GPS coordinates matched the overlook exactly. No filters, no editing. The photo was raw, straight from her phone's camera roll. "It's gotta be a double exposure," Marcus insisted. "Or lens flare." But Lena knew better. She'd been facing that exact patch of woods for nearly a full minute before taking the shot. She would have seen someone. She would have felt someone. They deleted the photo. Went to bed, but the next morning, Lena opened her cloud backup just to confirm it was gone. It was there. And the figure was clearer, not because the image had changed, but because the shadows had shifted. Now, the face was partially visible, pale, gaunt, eyes wide open, staring directly into the lens. She didn't tell the guys. Instead, she ran a reverse image search. Nothing. Posted it anonymously to a well-known paranormal forum under the title asterisk. "Hiking photo, anyone seen this before?" Asterisk. Within hours, replies flooded in. Most were jokes. "Your new hiking buddy. Ghost tour guide. That's just Dave. He's always photobombing." But one message stood out. Sent from an account with no profile, no history, no IP trace. It read, asterisk. "That's not a person. That's a placeholder, and it's still looking for you. Asterisk." Lena deleted the post, blocked the account, told herself it was nonsense. That night, she woke to a sound. A soft tap on her bedroom window. She lived on the second floor of a quiet apartment complex. No trees nearby, no fire escape. She pulled back the curtain. Nothing. But on the glass, fogged slightly from the cool night air, was a handprint. Small, delicate, not hers. And below it, written in the condensation, Asterisk, asterisk. I was in the photo too. Asterisk. She packed a bag before dawn, stayed with a cousin across town, changed her number, avoided mirrors, avoided group photos, avoided forests. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. Then, during a team lunch at work, someone took a picture of the office crew outside the building, just a casual shot for the company newsletter. Lena wasn't